Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about something I haven't talked about in a while, which is mastering. We're going to be going over all the steps that you need to make a really nice sounding master quickly with just Ableton stuff. Now, to go along with this video, I have dropped my definitive mastering rack V2. The link is right at the top of the description. So this is the rack right here. You guys may have seen this rack before in some of my other videos. But yeah, I've got the link at the top of the description for this video. So if you need just like a really solid resource for Ableton to be able to master your tracks really quickly, this is great for it. I'll give you a little demo here. This is the track I'm going to be using for this video. It's a pre-master of one of my older tracks that I haven't released yet. And I'll just show you really quick what this rack can do. So you can hear it'll get your track sounding really solid, really hard hitting, very quickly as well with just a few knob turns. So link to those at the top of the description. It's only $5, but every sale really helps support me so I can keep bringing you guys videos like this and kind of demystifying the process. And everything I'm going to be showing you in this video is in that rack, but it just goes a little bit crazier in the rack. You know, there's a little bit more stuff going on to really get your track sounding solid. But today we're going to be talking about how to do a quick master like that. So yeah. Link is at the top of the description. Thank you so much for the support, guys, and let's dive in on the mastering tutorial. So for mastering, we're going to be using 4 main things for like this simple sort of like quick master here. So we're going to be using an EQ8, which actually technically we're going to be using 5 because we're going to be using 2 of those. We're going to be using a saturator, a compressor, and then a limiter. And the thing is, none of these are really going to be doing anything too heavy. And that's the first thing that I want to say. It's like, really, most of the heavy lifting should be done in your mix, right? Like, a lot of people ask, like, oh, you know, how do I get my track sounding professional? Like, you know, I'm sure it's the pros have, like, the greatest mastering engineer or whatever. And honestly, I feel like the way it works is it's really, like, as you get better at production, you have to use less stuff on the master, right? Like, ideally, you should really just have to turn it up at the end, but you know, there's some stuff, and, like, that kind of gets in the way of that, and, like, all the tracks that hit so hard now, like, you do have to kind of push it, but ideally, like, your track would sound so good in the mix down that you're just turning the volume up, right? Like, that's what we want to aim for. It's not about getting better at producing means more effects. It means getting better at producing means less effects on the master because you know how to make your overall mix really good. So, that's how you want to think about that. Again, like, I think, you know, the idea that, oh, I just need to master my tracks and they'll sound like the pros, like, you got a little bit more work to do there, buddy. But yeah, so the first thing is going to be this first EQ, and what we're going to do with this is just a simple cut like that, and that's going to be right at 20 kilohertz, so we just type in 20 and then 1, 2, 3 zeros. And then we're going to do a cut here at 20 hertz, which that is at 30, so we can set that to 20. And so what we're doing here is essentially human hearing, as you guys know, only exists between 20 kilohertz and 20 hertz, right? This is like the first thing that you read first day when you start producing. So essentially, the thing is though, is that like, even though we can only hear that stuff, sound like instruments and different sounds still generate frequencies that are beyond those, right? Like frequencies lower than 20 hertz and frequencies higher than 20 kilohertz. And so what can happen is when you do have those frequencies happening but you're not hearing them, they can still be kind of messing up the headroom in your mix and, you know, making things just less clean, and you're not going to have as much room to push with the other stuff. So this is just a quick way at the end of the chain to kind of clean that up. And typically you want to do a little bit of this, like you guys see it in my videos where like a lot of times on the kick I'll just have this like that low cut, or even like on your hi-hats or your like bright sounds like your synths and stuff, you could cut out some of that high end there that we're not hearing, because again, like, we're not hearing anything above those ranges. It's just like having that extra information in there can sometimes mess up your mix and give you less headroom. So that's the first thing. Then the second EQ is just going to be a little bit of a boost. And what I mean by this is we're literally just going to do like that much. And you can do more, like, I would say pretty much nowhere louder than like 4 dB of gain. I usually do about there. And then like that. I try to make them even too. And then what I'll also usually do is take the gain here and just turn it down -1, because it kind of like evens out the volume to what it was before this, but with this effect, if that makes any sense. So here's without this. And then with it. So all this is doing is it's just focusing the track a little bit, because in terms of like dance music, and really most like popular music now, the main frequencies that we want to pay attention to are the low end and the high end, right? Like the bass and then the percussion. So this just kind of focuses that a little bit and kind of like makes those slightly louder than the mid-range, so that ultimately it just kind of like focuses the track more on those things. And we can even turn the scale down a little bit and just kind of like even that out. But then we have the saturator, and the same way that saturation adds like harmonic content and could kind of like glue your kick to your bass, for example, it's the same thing on a full track like this. So the way saturation works, as you know, is it's adding harmonics on top of a sound. So if we take this and we kind of like boost this up a little bit, now we're going to add a little bit of harmonics, and what it's going to do is it's going to kind of fill in the space between some of the sounds. Like I usually put it up to about there, and then what we can do is put the output down to make it a little bit more even with the volume. And essentially by adding harmonics to some of these sounds, it's going to kind of fill in the space between some of the sounds. And that's the sort of like gluing effect that you hear people talk about with saturation. So here's without it. And then with it. So obviously, it's slightly louder, but you hear that. Like again, without it. And then with it. Like everything is just so much more like together sounding. And it's a really subtle thing. And I would even maybe do a little bit less, like 3 dB, and then -1.5. Like you don't need that much. And if you do too much, you can kind of, start to get into that crunchy range that you don't really want to get near. But yeah, so that's just a nice kind of like little mix glue. And again, it goes back to what I was saying. It's like, if you have a crappy mix that doesn't really sound good, everything's messy, 3 dB of saturation is not going to do anything for it. You're not even going to be able to hear that. But if you already have a really solid mix that was really good just in the project file, then adding 3 dB of saturation with not even that much coming through because of that output cut there, that's going to do a lot when you already have a good mix. And yeah, then we have this compressor here, which typically what I would do is turn off the makeup gain. And we're going to turn the ratio down a little so it's a little bit less heavy. And then we're going to turn the attack up a little bit. And essentially what that's doing is it's kind of like on simpler, for example. Like if we get just a sample in there. See how as I turn up this fade in here, we're getting less of the transient of the sound? So that's exactly how the attack on the compressor is working. It's just the only difference being that it's how long it takes for the compression to kick in rather than the volume. So in this case, what that's doing now is we have like transients on our sounds, right? Like we have like that, like sort of like the punch of our sounds. A lot of times the compression can flatten those out. But by turning up this attack, now it's fading into the sound. So we can have our transient here, and then like the body of the sound here, it's going to fade up. So this isn't getting compressed, but this over here is. So it's kind of a best of both worlds situation with that. You don't compress the peaks of the sounds and the transients and all that, but you still get that nice like full kind of balanced compression sound. And that's what the compression is going to do. In terms of mastering, it's just about balancing the mix out a little bit. And it goes back to what I was saying with the saturation. It's like, if you have a crappy mix that is not really balanced in terms of volume to begin with, a little tiny bit of compression isn't going to balance that. But if you have a mix like this that's as good as it can be before the compression, and then you add that little tiny bit of compression, you'll see what I'm talking about. So here's without it. And then with it. So it's very subtle, but you can hear that. I'll even turn the ratio back up a little bit. You can hear that, right? Like it's very like just even now. It feels balanced. And if you do too much, just like the saturation, this can get overly crunchy as well. Like yeah, you don't really want that. So you gotta just make sure it's just a little bit on the peaks like that to kind of balance it and help bring some of those things down just a little bit that are poking through too much. Then we've got this limiter, and all this is doing, you'll notice right now, we're not clipping at all. We still have about 1 to 2 dB of headroom. So why would you use a limiter, you might ask? Well, the limiter just comes in essentially to kind of like cheat turning it up past 0 dB. Because music in 2021 and beyond is loud, right? Like we're in a post-loudness wars world. We're in like this world where the louder your music is, essentially the better it sounds, right? And the more likely people are to listen to it. So the limiter is just a really useful tool for that. We already have this mix that sounds really good without any limiting. It's not clipping at all. We're just using a limiter here to just push it past 0. And what I mean by this is we turn, also I usually turn that ceiling up to 0 just all the way. But if we start turning this up, you'll notice that it's getting louder. Like right now, like in theory, like, okay, we're hitting 0, so we shouldn't need a limiter, right? Well, you see what I mean? See how it gets louder? And that's essentially because it's just kind of like a form of compression, where it's kind of like, and actually, to that point, we could probably turn that look ahead up. But essentially, like, it's just a form of compression where it's pulling, it's kind of balancing the mix. So it's pulling some of those things that are a little bit quieter up. And this is kind of like the, like if you think of it like an Instagram filter, right? Like, you can take the greatest photo on your phone, but that Instagram filter is the thing that's going to take it and just kind of like, you know, make it fit, right? Like, it's just adding that extra touch on top of everything to get the loudness there, and again, just to get it up to the right level. Because as much as you could say, oh, like, this is wrong, like, don't do this, like, don't turn your master up. Well, alright, but it's like, okay, we're hitting 0. And the track is still not as loud as other tracks, right? Like, let's play, say, like, a Umac track or something. Well, why is our track not that loud now, right? Like, that's so much louder. And this is an older track of mine, so obviously it's going to be a bit more messy than the Pro there, but like, you hear what I mean? Like, this is how you get it to that level that you need for these tracks. And this isn't just techno. Now, if I was doing house, I'd probably do it a little bit less hard. Like, I think techno, you want to push it a little bit harder. But overall, like, that's what it's doing. It's just doing that nice, clean gain boost at the end to get it up to the level of other professional tracks in the style that you're mastering your track in. And yeah. So that was going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get my definitive mastering rack version 2 right in the top of the description. It's literally just $5, but it really helps keep me going so I can keep bringing you guys new videos. Plus, you get a really awesome mastering rack that can take any track and make it sound really good. And if you already have a really good track, can take it to the next level and make it sound really good and get it on the level that it needs to be. So link to that is on the top of the description. Thank you for all the support, guys. Everybody who grabs it, every sale really helps. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow.